Hello, thank you for joining me today for Honest Astrology. My name is Mariana, and today I'm bringing you the June 2026 astrology forecast. I'm kind of calling this one From Understanding to Expression. So I do hope that you appreciate it. I will go ahead and dive in. This is coming to you a little bit later than I had originally hoped, but all for exciting reasons. So I'm not even going to attempt to apologize, but without further ado, the month of June 2026 begins with a noticeable change in tone. After the mental acceleration of May, the astrology reflects a slowing pace, though perhaps just enough for us to process what has recently shifted. April brought repeated Aries activations. May opened the first real chapter of Uranus in Gemini, and the Sagittarius Full Moon on Sunday, May 31st, which was also Blue Moon, invited us all to step back from the speed of information and consider the larger meaning behind it. June's 2026 astrology picks up from there. We're focusing less on what's changing and more on how we understand, integrate, and eventually express what these changes are teaching us. Mercury enters Cancer on Monday, June 1st, moving communication out of Gemini's quick exchange and into Cancer's emotional awareness. This does not stop the momentum of Uranus in Gemini, but it can change how that momentum is processed. The mind becomes more responsive to memory, intuition, belonging, and personal context. The Gemini New Moon, then, on Sunday, June 14th, will continue the larger story of new communication systems, evolving perspectives, and Chiron's transit in Taurus, beginning Friday, June 19th, is probably going to shift us all into a longer healing cycle. Ultimately, though, it's going to be toward more stability, value, embodiment, and material security. So I don't think we'll mind. Now let's explore how the cosmic dance throughout June is probably going to help us move from this new understanding into expression. We will consider the wisdom of Mercury in Cancer, of course, the Gemini New Moon, Chiron in Taurus, Cancer season in the solstice, Mercury turning retrograde in Cancer, and our full moon in Capricorn, as well as Jupiter entering Leo. Together, we'll discover how this might be a month for sorting signal from the noise, grounding recent insight into lived experience, and preparing to carry what has become clear into a more creative and visible chapter. Now, I think this is all going to be a bit characterized by mental acceleration and emotional integration. If May felt like arriving at the foot of a mountain and suddenly realizing how much terrain lay ahead, June begins with the first meaningful conversations about what that journey is revealing. This month opens with Mercury entering Cancer on Monday, June 1st. This is immediately changing the tone of energy and exchange. Throughout May, Mercury spent time activating Uranus in Gemini, Neptune in Aries, Pluto in Aquarius, Saturn in Aries, and all of that was helping to accelerate the flow of information, ideas, and shifting perspectives. As Mercury moves into Cancer now, attention is going to turn from gathering more information and toward understanding how recent developments actually feel, what they mean for us personally, how they connect to our deeper needs, memories, and sense of belonging, And then, of course, the Sun in Gemini forming that friendly sextile to Saturn in Aries on Tuesday, June 2nd, further reinforce this shift by helping us organize our thoughts and begin separating useful insight from simple mental noise. Now, that process is not entirely straightforward. On Wednesday, June 3rd, Mercury in Cancer formed a square with Neptune in Aries, and this created an atmosphere of tension between perception and interpretation. Cancer really processes information emotionally, while Neptune can blur distinctions between intuition, imagination, hope, and projection. This does not necessarily mean confusion, though. Rather, it could have been highlighting the importance of discernment. So much like a meaningful conversation on a long journey, the first explanation that comes to mind may not be the deepest truth available. Some of the stories we tell ourselves about recent events may need refinement before they become reliable sources of guidance. June's early astrology really invites this observation before reaction and reflection before certainty. Now, the week ultimately concludes a little bit later on with, I feel, the last quarter moon in Pisces on Monday, June 8th. Last quarter moons traditionally represent periods of review, release, and adjustment. And Pisces adds an additional layer of surrender to the process too. So rather than searching for immediate answers, I think this lunation is encouraging trust in the integration process itself. Not every realization arrives all at once. And not every question requires immediate solution. The first chapter of June really reminds us then that understanding often develops gradually as experience settles into perspective, which seems to be preparing us for the Gemini New Moon at mid-month, as well as the new conversations, connections, and possibilities it will bring. Of course, if you're ever curious about viewing this style of astrology for yourself, looking at how the energies might be interacting differently for you and your friends or loved ones, or even exploring how place might affect astrology as we've come to know it, you can visit my app, dial.onescence.com. There's all kinds of tools over there. Everything is available for free. If you really love it, of course you can grow with it, but there's never any pressure. This is something that I truly find fascinating, and I'd love to share it with you if you are so inclined as well. Again, that's dial, DAIL .onescence, ONESCENCE.com. Okay? Thank you. That's my blurb. Now, for the Gemini New Moon and how that's all related to this communication stuff I've been hinting at. As the month continues, the conversations that began in early June could really start opening some unexpected doors. Anyone who's ever attended a retreat, a pilgrimage, or a meaningful gathering knows that there is often a moment when casual exchange gives way to something deeper. Perhaps it's a chance conversation that introduces a new perspective. A question leads to an insight that changes how we see a familiar situation. Or a story shared around a campfire or overlooking a mountain vista suddenly reframes something we thought we had understood. The middle of June carries a similar quality. First, on Monday, June 9th, we see Venus conjoining Jupiter in Cancer. This is expanding themes of connection, of belonging, generosity, and emotional support. There is a sense that people are more willing to share openly. I think listen carefully and even create environments where meaningful conversations can occur more naturally. However, as Mercury in Cancer then squares Saturn in Aries on Tuesday, June 10th, the focus could shift dramatically. Ultimately, this is encouraging greater discipline and discernment in these communications, though. Then on Thursday, June 12th, Uranus in Gemini is going to form a square with the true node in Pisces. And this is creating one of the most significant evolutionary turning points that we've seen lately. Uranus represents disruption, innovation, and awakening, while the true node points towards collective development and future growth. When Uranus, who's newly established in Gemini, squares the true node here, I think it's going to be highlighting the tension between the rapidly evolving communication systems, technologies, and ideas that Uranus and Gemini is here to facilitate, as well as our ability to integrate all of that meaningfully, which is what the true node is kind of about. Therefore, we may all feel pulled toward new possibilities while simultaneously recognizing old assumptions, beliefs, or ways of relating to information are really no longer sufficient anymore. So then this sequence ultimately culminates with the Gemini New Moon on Sunday, June 12th. New moons already mark new beginnings, and in Gemini, the emphasis falls on learning, communication, curiosity, and perspective. This lunation arrives only 2 days after Uranus challenges the true node, making it one of the first major seed points in the unfolding Uranus and Gemini story as well. These new conversations, new networks, new educational pursuits, and new ways of exchanging ideas may finally start to take shape, right? We'd all be wise to remember, though, Gemini rarely asks for certainty. It's really here encouraging curiosity. And in all of these ways, the middle of June reminds us that even though growth may also come from finding the right answer, it often begins by asking a better question, right? Now, moving on from there, I really see some healing at the foundational level as Chiron is going to be entering Taurus. As we see our month progress, the focus will shift away from gathering new perspectives and really towards something more tangible. After weeks of conversations, questions, emerging possibility, there comes a point along any meaningful journey when attention naturally returns to the present environment, right? The mountain is no longer something to discuss. The lake is no longer just scenery. The experience becomes immediate. June reaches a similar turning point as Venus in Leo forms a trine with Neptune in Aries on Tuesday, June 16th. Opening up some space for inspiration, creativity, and a deeper appreciation of the life's intangible qualities. Yet, just the following day, Venus also opposes Pluto, who's retrograde in Aquarius. So this is going to be immediately reminding us that authentic growth requires more than inspiration alone. It's going to ask us to examine what we truly value and whether our foundations are strong enough to support the future we're trying to build. Now that question becomes the heart of the month when Chiron enters Taurus on Friday, June 19th. Chiron's move from Aries into Taurus marks one of June's most significant long-term developments. During its passage through Aries, Chiron emphasized healing around identity, autonomy, courage, and self-definition. In Taurus now, the focus will shift toward value, stability, security, embodiment, and sustainability. Collectively, the question will change from who am I or are we to what truly supports me or all of us. Because Taurus reminds us that growth cannot be sustained through inspiration alone. Ideas require resources, vision requires structure, even the most meaningful transformations eventually need roots, nourishment, and a place to take hold. This theme also strengthens further as the Sun enters Cancer on Sunday, June 21st. It's also immediately forming a sextile with Chiron in Taurus. Now, Cancer and Taurus share appreciation for safety, nourishment, and continuity, making this a very supportive alignment for healing and integration. Then later that same day, the first quarter moon in Libra will introduce the next stage of action, encouraging us to begin applying what we have learned within our relationships and daily lives over the course of this middle to late end of June coming, right? So whereas the first half of June asks us to explore new ideas and perspective, this second half really begins asking more practical questions. Sort of like, which of those insights are valuable enough to build life around? Now, of course, I have to touch on the fact that we have Mercury retrograde coming in by the end of this month as well. And I think this is going to be about the stories that we tell. By late June, the pace of the month will change again. The excitement of new discoveries eventually kind of settles in. Conversations become quieter, and the attention gradually turns inward. Anyone who has returned from a meaningful journey knows this feeling. The experience itself may be ending, but its impact is still unfolding. Long drives home, journal entries, photographs, conversations with friends, it all often works to reveal insights that were not fully visible while everything was happening. That final week of June that we have coming is carrying a similar atmosphere. On Wednesday, June 25th, Venus in Leo is going to form a trine with Saturn in Aries. This will help to stabilize the relationships, commitments, and creative aspirations that have been emerging throughout the month as important themes. There's also an opportunity there to identify what feels genuine, sustainable, and worth carrying forward, right? And if everything isn't immediately clear at that time, know that later the same day, the Sun in Cancer is forming a square with Neptune in Aries too. So this is also introducing a bit of uncertainty and asking for reflection. Where Cancer seeks emotional truth, Neptune can sometimes blur distinctions between our intuition, memory, hope, and projection. So this is going to be less about confusion than it is about recognizing and understanding that we often learn in layers and giving ourselves that grace. So we may discover that in some assumptions we need to revise, and that certain experience may actually hold deeper meaning than we initially recognized. This theme becomes even more pronounced when Mercury stations retrograde in Cancer on Monday, June 29th. Mercury retrograde periods are often associated with review, reflection, reconsideration, things people don't really feel like they want to waste their time doing all the time, right? So we hear about frustration, we hear about delay, but again, if we're looking at this as to find how it's serving us, there's more that kind of completes the picture. Now, in Cancer especially, that review process will focus on family patterns. And again, the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and where we belong. Then just hours after Mercury begins its retrograde cycle, we'll have the full moon in Capricorn illuminating the sky that same evening. Full moons bring culmination and awareness, and this one highlights the relationship between Cancer's focus on personal needs and Capricorn's emphasis on responsibility, achievement, and long-term structure. Questions that have maybe been developing throughout the month could finally come into focus at this time before the month closes out. Perhaps we're asking, what deserves continued investment, or which commitments support genuine well-being and which have simply become habits. As June approaches its conclusion, the astrology invites us to separate what is meaningful from what is merely familiar. Reflection could become a tool for refinement, preparing us for the next chapter and helping ensure that the insights we've gained become something we can actually live. Now, that's not even the end of it, because we still have Jupiter moving into Leo and bringing some creative confidence, right? Every meaningful journey eventually reaches a moment of return. The mountain remains where it's always been. The forests, lakes, and trails continue their rhythms. Yet the traveler who leaves is rarely the same person who arrived. And after a month spent processing change, exploring new perspectives, examining personal foundations, and reflecting on what truly matters, June will eventually reach a similar threshold. The final days of the month are concerned with application, asking us all, what have we learned? What deserves to move forward with us? Which insights are ready to become visible through our choices, actions, and creative expression? Part of that answer arrives through momentum building at the end of June. As Saturday, June 28th, Mars in Taurus will form a sextile with Jupiter in Cancer, which will support some creative connection between action and growth. Now, Mars has spent weeks helping establish practical stability in Taurus, while Jupiter in Cancer has emphasized emotional nourishment, belonging, and support. So together, they're suggesting that the foundations built throughout the month are capable of supporting meaningful progress. Mars then enters Gemini, reactivating themes of communication, learning, and exchange. Unlike the rapid acceleration experienced early in the year, however, this energy really could arrive after this month of reflection and integration to bring emphasis that's no longer on gathering information as quickly as possible, but actually on engaging with ideas more intentionally. The most significant shift on Tuesday, June 30th, when Jupiter enters Leo. This movement into Leo begins a year-long chapter centered on creativity, confidence, leadership, generosity, and authentic self-expression. Excuse me, there's a puppy barking now. All right, hopefully the puppy stops barking. Okay, so back to the shift that's arriving when Jupiter enters Leo on Tuesday, June 30th. This movement of Jupiter's into Leo is going to begin a year that has more emphasis on confidence, leadership, generosity, authentic self-expression, and creativity. Now, throughout its time in Cancer, Jupiter really encouraged growth through emotional awareness, connection, and the cultivation of supportive environments. In Leo, though, the focus is going to turn more outward. The questions will become, how will we share what we have learned? How can we contribute our gifts? And how might we participate more fully in the communities and creative endeavors that matter to us? So June began by asking us to transform information into understanding, but it ultimately concludes by boldly asking us to transform that understanding into expression. All right, and we can enjoy that. We can enjoy understanding, becoming, expression throughout this month. When the month begins, yes, many of us may still find ourselves standing in the wake of the Sagittarius Full Moon that happened on Sunday, May 31st. Maybe we're attempting to make sense of a world that seemed to be changing faster than our existing frameworks could comfortably accommodate. April had accelerated the new beginnings through repeated Aries activations. May introduced the first real atmosphere of Uranus in Gemini, bringing rapid developments in communication, technology, information, and perspective. June will not stop those changes, giving us some space to understand them, though, instead. Through Mercury's entrance into Cancer, the Gemini New Moon, Chiron's entrance into Taurus, Mercury retrograde, and Jupiter's entrance into Leo, the month gradually transforms information into insight and then insight into understanding. Of course, like any meaningful pilgrimage, the value of the journey can't be found in reaching a destination. True richness emerges through conversations shared with strangers who become friends, moments of quiet observation, unexpected realizations, and a growing appreciation for relationships, landscapes, and experiences that might otherwise go unnoticed. Throughout June, the astrology repeatedly encourages us to slow down enough to recognize what is actually supporting our growth. This is how we clarify what deserves our continued attention as the next chapter begins. May we carry forward the understanding that emerges this month with both humility and confidence. May we remain curious enough to continue learning, grounded enough to embody what we discover, and courageous enough to express it authentically. And as Jupiter finally enters Leo and new creative chapters begin, may we all be reminded that meaningful expression is a result of understanding ourselves, our values, and our place within our living world well enough to participate in it more fully. That is what I have for you this month. Of course, I will be back each week with a bit more of a deep dive into what you can expect during that weekly climate. Otherwise, if you would like research or more resources, go ahead and check out the dial. Go ahead and head on over to Oness Wellbeing at onescence.com for free resources as well as access to everything else in the Oness Wellbeing ecosystem. Take care. Blessed be. Have a wonderful month, and I will be back soon.